It is well known that the early Earth is an inexhaustible well of mystery and wonder. The further back we go, the wilder the world gets, the less it resembles the one we inhabit today. Because of this, the past has become a fascinating time to imagine, especially if we think about what it would be like to travel back then. However, if we had a magic button that could send you back into the past permanently, I am sure you would have a hard time, well, pressing it. At least I would, since you don't have to be a genius to realize that prehistoric Earth was exceptionally brutal. It was home to relentless titans, dinosaurs, saber-toothed cats, woolly mammoths, mosasaurs. The list goes on. Their prowess, size, and endurance are legendary. But sometimes we need a truly singular fossil to remember how truly extreme they were. The most famous examples are perhaps those that show two animals locked in an eternal battle, such as the infamous fighting dinosaurs. They are certainly intense. But what best demonstrates the true grit of prehistoric animals are specimens showing gruesome wounds, scars, or diseases that somehow they managed to survive. In some cases, recovering completely and making me feel ashamed of my reaction to a simple blood test. Chapter 1. The Annihilated Jaw, the Prognathodon. Given that prehistoric animals were so bold, we have a long list of examples to choose from. But a good place to start is with an animal that literally had its face ripped off. And yet, it survived to tell the tale. Who are we talking about? The Prognathodon. You may not have heard of it, but it belonged to the iconic mosasaur group and was one of the largest members, with specimens up to 12 meters long. It was a true marine colossus, heavier than some whales. Even among mosasaurs, it was famous for possessing incredibly robust jaws, backed by absurdly powerful muscles and thick, conical, serrated teeth. It is no surprise that it was an apex predator that thrived in North America, Africa, Europe, and Australia during the late Cretaceous. It is believed to have hunted virtually anything. The stomach contents of one specimen included fish, cephalopods, and turtles. Combining this range with the general aggressiveness of mosasaurs, it follows that, every now and then, their own kind was fair game. That is, cannibalism. One absolutely gruesome example was seen in the specimen catalogued as NHMM 2012-3722. Discovered in the Netherlands, this prehistoric veteran presented an unmistakable wound. It was essentially missing its face. To be precise, large chunks of its upper jaw, cortical bone, and parts of its premaxilla had been torn away by something ridiculously powerful. Given the size of the victim, the attacker is presumed to have been another mosasaur, perhaps a fellow prognathodon trying to devour it. Close your eyes and imagine for a second what it would be like to have your upper jaw annihilated in the wild, millions of years ago, with no medical assistance, and with flippers instead of hands. The odds are not good, are they? For most living things, a shattered jaw would be fatal. But for this prognathodon, it was just another Tuesday. Despite this massive hole where part of its face should have been, the specimen appears to have survived for a long period, showing signs of bone and tissue healing. However, the recovery must have been excruciating. The inflammation caused by the wound was so intense that it compromised blood flow in certain areas, causing sections of its face to turn into dead tissue. To make matters worse, bacteria seeped into the wound, causing a severe infection. Although it survived the initial physical trauma for a long time, possibly more than a year, the subsequent bacterial infection seems to have been its downfall. Not through organ failure, but because the predator reached a point where it could no longer operate its jaws, or what was left of them, and died of starvation. But note, the prognathodon was fine without the jaw. Relatively speaking, it was the pesky bacteria that ruined the party. A certified tough cookie, without a doubt. Chapter 2. The Indestructible King, the T-Rex. But not every catastrophic injury ends in this result. Some animals recover almost 100%, and perhaps no one shows as much durability as the king of prehistory himself, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Over the years, multiple specimens have proven that this giant earned its title. In fact, some of the most famous specimens you've heard of are those that present the largest number of pathologies. Take Stan as an example, a T-Rex titan discovered in 1987, who lived 66 million years ago and measured almost 12 meters long. An absolute behemoth and, undoubtedly, an alpha predator. But, as his skeleton shows, being king was not easy. Stan was plagued by numerous injuries. For starters, bore marks were located on the back of the skull and on the ribs that only fit one type of tooth, the tooth of another T-Rex. Stan fought horrible battles against other tyrants and survived. They were not simple nips, they were deep enough to cause terrible pain. In the case of the bite on the skull, it caused him an ugly concussion at the very least, as it was severe enough to puncture his brain case. Apparently for Stan, this was light work, and not even the worst of it. A third bite at the base of the skull showed signs of having literally broken his neck. A neck fracture is usually fatal news. But for a T-Rex, I guess it is an unpleasant inconvenience, as it healed over time. The healing was not perfect. The damage caused bone overgrowth and the fusion of two vertebrae, leading to chronic discomfort and mobility issues. Stan did not die from these injuries, but of old age, reaching an estimated age of 24. Very respectable for a large theropod. But he is not the only T-Rex to have gone through the ordeal. The most famous of all, Sue, might surpass him, living much longer despite gruesome injuries. Sue, the queen of the tyrannosaurs, withstood what should have been career-ending injuries. She suffered a badly damaged right shoulder blade, a torn tendon in the same arm, possibly inflicted during a struggle with prey, and 3 broken ribs. And of course, in typical T-Rex fashion, she survived all of this with clear signs of healing. In addition to violent injuries, Sue had to deal with health problems. Notably, her left fibula was massively enlarged and she had fused caudal vertebrae, both caused by infections. The end of her tail was damaged and fused, possibly from arthritis, and she had holes in the front of her skull. Initially thought to be bites, analysis revealed something more nauseating. Sue likely had a parasite infestation that bored into her jaw and fed on her titanic skull. Despite all this pathology, Sue not only survived, but thrived, reaching a length of over 12 meters and weighing up to 14 tons. And as a final challenge to her injuries, she lived to be 33 years old, making her the longest-lived T-Rex specimen ever recovered. Chapter 3: Aid in Prehistory, Neanderthals and Saber-tooths. But this toughness was not exclusive to the kings. Mammals also endured their share of madness, including, by the way, prehistoric humans, who were made of a different kind of stuff. If you recall one of my previous videos, you know that Neanderthals, in particular, could be a pretty extreme bunch. Perhaps no Neanderthal specimen demonstrates this as much as Shanidar 1, affectionately nicknamed Nandi, who might be the toughest fossilized hominid yet. Nandi was a Neanderthal from approximately 45 to 65,000 years ago, who lived in Iraq. His life was so harsh that excavators immediately noticed his severely deformed skeleton. One of his most prominent injuries occurred early in life, a crushing blow to the head that not only shattered his left eye socket, leaving him blind in that eye, but also caused permanent traumatic brain injury. This may have led to a degree of paralysis, contributing to his right arm and leg shrinking and atrophying. Living like this was not easy. His atrophied limbs fractured in several places, which worsened muscle functionality. Although he recovered from this, the damage may have led to the loss of his right forearm and hand, which might have been surgically amputated. And the list of problems continues. His legs were broken, which caused him a pronounced limp. He was also almost deaf, with lesions blocking his right ear canal. Even eating was difficult, as he heavily used his teeth as a tool to compensate for his limited arm, which severely wore down his teeth, causing him jaw pain and headaches. Additionally, his body showed signs of diffuse idiopathic skeletal hyperostosis, DISH, which causes stiffness and pain. Nandi should have died very young. However, he did not, and his survival, despite the magnitude of his problems, suggests 2 things. 1, someone owed him at least 100 drinks, and 2, he received help. It is impossible for a Neanderthal to have survived alone with such injuries. The cave where he was found contained at least 10 other individuals who presumably cared for him. As one paleontologist stated, Nandi would not have been able to offer anything meaningful to others. His survival demonstrates a degree of empathy and mutual care, and that Neanderthal medical attention turned out to be very effective, as Nandi defied all odds and lived to approximately 45 years old, making him an elder for his time. The same logic of cooperation has been applied to another animal whose sociability has been a subject of debate: the Smilodon, the famous saber-toothed cat. Take the case of Lac MHC 131, a Smilodon fatalis pelvis discovered in the La Brea tar pits. The pelvis was malformed and severely destroyed on the right side. Initially, it was believed to be from trauma, but recent scans suggested a devastating birth defect, where the hip joint was essentially shattered. While a deformed pelvis is not necessarily fatal for a human today, for a Smilodon, it was a death sentence. Its exclusive prey were giant megafaunal beasts, and a dysfunctional pelvis prevented the Smilodon from pursuing or holding down prey. Yet, despite these obstacles, this specimen lived to adulthood, something considered impossible if the Smilodon was a solitary predator. Therefore, many cite this fossil as strong evidence of gregarious behavior in saber-toothed cats, suggesting that its family unit must have shared their meals and defended territory for it. Chapter 4. The Walking Triage, the Allosaurus. Let's go back to the dinosaurs, as they have even more incredible stories. Remember the prognathodon that had its face ripped off? Well, there is a dinosaur that had a piece of its head torn off and survived to tell the tale. This story involves an adult Edmontosaurus ankins, a giant hadrosaur. A large chunk of its skull was missing. Specifically, a section of its right brain case had been violently removed with large drag marks around the wound, implying a powerful bite. A patch of fossilized skin and flesh that was ripped from the area was found, suggesting the eye was also removed. There is only one animal that could have done something so devastating to an elephant-sized giant: a Tyrannosaurus. The Edmontosaurus showed clear signs of bone growth and healing, indicating that it was a real case of failed predation in the late Cretaceous, despite having its head almost ripped off. But we cannot talk about pathology without mentioning the walking triage unit, Big Al. Big Al, the best-known Allosaurus, was famous for being extremely beat up. Throughout his life, this Allosaur suffered a staggering 19 major injuries. This included multiple rib fractures, a torn right hand, a bore hole in the shoulder, numerous infections, fused vertebrae, and a broken tail. None of these 19 injuries killed him, but number 20, a severely broken left foot that became infected, did. The infection was so severe that the bone essentially began to rot, making walking nearly impossible. Big Al likely died of starvation from being unable to hunt. Ironically, a second well-preserved Allosaurus was later discovered, and was named Big Al II, and he was also plagued by injuries. Unlike the original, Big Al II survived a major foot injury and reached maturity. However, fate caught up with him in adulthood when he suffered a severe fracture in his ischium, a pelvic bone, from which he never recovered. Conclusion: absurd resilience, a Guardians of Wildlife perspective. We could continue talking about pathologies, but I want to end with one last non-dinosaur specimen, to emphasize the absurd resilience. Remember the case of Big Al, whose death came from a single foot injury. Now imagine if both feet were out of order, and to top it off, both arms as well. That alone would kill a human, but apparently not a Smilocutes, a giant Triassic phytosaur. Paleontologists discovered a specimen with not one, but 8 fractures concentrated in all 4 limbs. It suffered damage to the left humerus, the right ulna, and then the femur and fibula of both legs. While the cause is a mystery, the impossible thing is that it virtually had no functional limbs, and yet it survived in this state for several painful months, and possibly years. It is believed to have benefited from its semi-aquatic lifestyle, and the low metabolic rates typical of phytosaurs, allowing it to survive much longer without easily getting food than a mammal. This individual is commonly considered the most pathological specimen of the entire Triassic period, an accomplishment we cannot be jealous of, but one that proves, once again, how absurdly resilient prehistoric animals were.